Welcome back to Punk Rock Theologian. It's time for our next session of Unapologetics, where we don't apologize for truth, but we learn how to represent our King well. We are talking about what it means to live as ambassadors for Christ, not just people with beliefs, but people who represent our King and his kingdom everywhere we go. As a reminder, this all comes from 2 Corinthians 5:20. It says, "We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God." That means that when you speak, you're not just sharing opinions, you're representing truth. The problem is that we live in a culture that doesn't just disagree with truth, it redefines it. I told you last month that 99% of all the objections to Christianity you're ever going to find will fall into one of three buckets. And last time we looked at the first one, which was relativism, saying that, well, I mean, that can be true for you, but not for me. And how that's logically self refuting. It doesn't work. Today, we're going to look at the other two big ideas that you will run into all the time. And these are the kind of ideas that make a lot of people feel either intimidated or just go silent because they don't know how to respond. And really, that's my objective with this. I want you to have something that you can trust, that you can know how to represent your king, even in this conversation. And so the first one we'll look at is pluralism. Pluralism says that all paths lead to the same place. All religions are basically the same. We're all worshiping the same God. We just call them by different names. And if you have the audacity to disagree with that, then you're labeled as arrogant, narrow, closed minded. It's a very crowd pleasing idea. It's all warm and inclusive and progressive. You'll often hear people explain it with this like allegory of blind men investigating an elephant. One of them feels a trunk or a leg and says, "Oh, an elephant is like a tree." Another one feels the tail and says, "Oh, an elephant is like a rope." Another one is feeling the side of the elephant and goes, "Wow, an elephant is like a big wall." The conclusion there is that we're all describing the same reality, we just have different perspectives. And I mean, sure, that sounds good, but it falls apart as soon as you start to take it seriously. Because pluralism violates a basic law of logic. It's the law of non contradiction. Don't get hung up on the big term. It just means something can't be true and false at the same time. Like the light that is on right now, or the camera that is recording. If I say it's on, and you say it's off, then we can't both be right. And the simple fact is that religion, not just Christianity, all religions make truth claims. And so if one belief says Jesus is God and another one says he's merely a man, they can't both be true. And so let's just look at that. In John 14:6, in a conversation about how to make it to God, Jesus answered, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Like, Jesus doesn't leave room for pluralism. He doesn't say he's one of many ways. He doesn't say he's an option. He says he is the way. We can keep going. 1 Timothy 2:5 says, "For there is one God and one mediator between God and mankind, the man Christ Jesus." Pretty simple. You don't need to be a theologian with a degree on this one. One God, one mediator. That excludes everything else. Or how about Acts 4:12? "Salvation is found in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven given to mankind by which we must be saved." No other name, no backup plan, no alternate route. And don't misunderstand me here. I'm not even saying you have to accept all these verses as true. You can argue and say, well, that's just what Christianity says. Yeah, sure is. But the point is, it can't be true and something else also be true. You can't have the one saying this is the only option be true and something else saying, no, I'm a good option too, also be true. So logically speaking, here are your options. All religions out there, every single one of them could be false. That is a viable possibility. That is logically possible. Or one of them could be true. That's also possible. But they simply cannot all be true at the same time. That's not a theological issue, it's a logic issue. We don't even have to talk about the Bible or theology or God in any sense to disrupt pluralism. They simply cannot all be true. One of the great examples of this is how C.S. Lewis pointed out that Jesus plainly and clearly claimed to be God. And that claim can either be true or false. It's one or the other. If it's true, well, then he really is God and he's really the only way. But if it's false, all that means is we have another question that's did he know it was false? Was he intentionally false and lying? Or was it false, but he really thought it was true? And so he's just crazy. As Lewis put it, he's a liar, a lunatic, or the Lord. Those are your only choices. You cannot call him just a good moral teacher. And so when you encounter this, when someone says all religions are the same, don't panic over it. Just ask a simple question. How did you come to that conclusion? You don't have to try to tear them down. It can't sustain itself. So now let's move on to the last bucket of major objections, and that is scientism. You might hear it referred to as materialism or naturalism. And I'll admit, there are some subtle nuances between all those terms, but the fact is, they are all the same principle. That is the belief that only science gives us truth. Like, if it can't be tested and measured, it isn't real. Everything else, morality, philosophy, religion, all of that stuff out there is just opinion, it's just ideas. And so, this scientism concept, it sounds intelligent, but honestly, it collapses even faster than pluralism does. If someone says science is the only way to know truth, just ask them, can you prove that scientifically? Because you can't. That statement isn't science. It's a philosophical claim about science, which is hilarious to me that we're making a philosophical claim about something that's saying that philosophy isn't real. Like, what are you doing? And this is what's considered the truly intellectual. These are the smart people. Don't get me wrong, I love science. Science studies the natural world. But the unavoidable conclusion of that is that it doesn't say anything about the supernatural. That means it can't prove that only science gives truth. Like, the person making that statement has absolutely no testable scientific evidence that scientism is true. They can't prove scientifically that the supernatural doesn't exist. So the claim defeats itself right off the bat. And even beyond that, there are things that we all know are real that science cannot measure. Logic, math, justice, beauty, love, humor, friendship, those are not made of atoms. You can't put them in a lab. But no one in their right mind actually believes that these things aren't real. This is what Ecclesiastes 3:11 is talking about, where it says, "He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end." It's showing that God puts things in us, just innate awareness that there is more to reality, to the human experience, or whatever word you want to give it. There is more to what is real than just what we can quantify and measure and explain. In reality, there are moral truths that we know with greater certainty than scientific truths. Like, scientific models change. Our understanding of planets changes. Our knowledge of electrons has changed many times in the past 70 years. And as we learn new things, it changes what we thought we knew. There's an entire Wikipedia page of superseded theories. That's great. That's exactly what science is supposed to be doing. This is called learning. But there is nothing we will ever discover that suddenly makes things like rape, genocide, or kidnapping become morally acceptable. We know those things are wrong. You don't need scientific proof, and you're never going to prove it not wrong. And so, where does that knowledge come from? That is a question science cannot answer. And honestly, there's an even bigger problem. Some materialists or naturalists will claim that all of our thoughts and feelings and emotions, those are just products of chemical reactions in your brain. But that leads to a real scary place if you carry that line of logic out any further. Like, if everything we think and do is just biology, then justice is a fantasy. It can't even be possible. Because no matter how heinous the crime, how can you hold any person responsible if they're just dancing to their DNA, as Richard Dawkins puts it? And even if you want to reject that whole responsibility thing because it's a slippery slope argument, I'll give you that one. But if all your thoughts are just chemical reactions, then why trust any thought you have? Why would you even trust the thought that led you to believe that in the first place? Once again, this is not about winning the argument. We're not trying to make anyone else look silly. Just ask good questions. Do you believe love is real? Do you believe justice is real? Science has nothing to say on any of those, but they're real. Where do those come from? That's how you move the conversation forward. Remember, your job is not to overpower people, it's to remove obstacles. Because most of the people you encounter aren't really rejecting Jesus. They're reacting to ideas that they've never actually slowed down enough to examine. And that's why 1 Peter 3:15 gives us our marching orders. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. That is the posture of an ambassador. Not aggressive and not defensive. Just clear, thoughtful, and respectful. Truth doesn't need to be forced. It just needs to be represented well. So until next time, pay attention. Listen for these ideas to show up in conversations. And when it does, don't shut down. Don't get intimidated. Just ask, how did you come to that conclusion? You're not trying to win. You're representing your king. So clear the path, speak the truth, and trust the spirit.